Sunny Strasburg. Lovely to have this time to chat with you. How are you doing today?
Amazing. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm going to start by just apologizing for my croaky voice. I don't always have this kind of dusky sound. So I was watching my favorite football soccer team, Arsenal, playing at the weekend. I was back in England seeing my family, and we got a last minute winner. And so I just screamed like an idiot, and my family was screaming too. And so I lost my voice for a few days. So sorry about that.
I'm glad it's back.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was hoping it'd be back for our recording today. So yeah, I'm in New Jersey and you're in Salt Lake, and you were just telling me what a lovely place it is there. Sounds great. What is it that you love about living there?
Wow, Salt Lake is an incredible place. I was sharing with you, we live right next to the mountains, and so I can run east and go trail running and not see another soul, or I can go west and go right into downtown Salt Lake. I haven't really found a lot of places like that. I love mountain biking and climbing and running and hiking, so it's the perfect spot for all of that good stuff.
Hmm. And what's the scene like in Utah around psychedelics? Because I know, Reed Robinson and Cedar Psychiatry are there, and
Mhm.
but it's also got an image as being somewhat more religiously reserved. What's it actually like there?
It's an interesting place. There's quite a subculture in Salt Lake City, and especially in downtown Salt Lake City. It's pretty wild. I know Reed and Paul Thielking over there, and there's a thriving psychedelic community here. There's also a very vibrant Burning Man culture in Salt Lake, which you wouldn't expect. So, but I work with a lot of people that are all over the map, politically and religiously in my ketamine practice, and people are very excited about psychedelic medicine now that it's going mainstream. More people are accepting, if someone prescribes it, then it must be good stuff and it must be okay to take. So I'm watching the attitudes change right before my eyes as I live here, so
Awesome.
pretty
Oh,
wild.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love hearing that. I really do. Um,
Yeah.
so we got tons to talk about. Tons. I'm going to try and fit it all in. Let's see where we
Okay.
go. And I want to start off on a subject that I've never spoken about, and we very rarely cover here in Psych SA, and that is the subject of magic. Um, because in doing a bit of research and getting to know you before we recorded, I saw kind of that magic theme coming up, and something I'm interested in. When I was younger, I did tarot cards, and I'm a Jewish guy that's interested in Kabbalah, and there is a magic tradition that kind of comes from that kind of Kabbalistic yeah realm. So I'm just interested. What is magic to you? First of all, how do you spell magic? Do you spell it with a C or a K, or both?
Wow. It's an interesting thing that happens for me when I talk about it, because I've been doing it for decades and have
Mm,
been so internal about it. And it's kind of funny. It's like psychedelics, where people are coming out of the closet about magic and paganism and all these things that were not spoken about. And especially living in Utah, this has been a very quiet practice for me. But I'm really proud. I've been recently coming out about it. Um, my grandmother, so I have an Italian background, and my maternal grandmother, I'm pretty convinced, was a Stragheria, which is
oh
the
wow.
Italian lineage of witchcraft. And she never spoke about it outwardly, but later doing research on Italian witchcraft, it was so obvious she came from that tradition. And it's so interesting with organized religion like Catholicism, where when it goes into areas where there's already an established belief system, that belief system gets permeates the new religion, right? So my grandma would pray to the different saints. She had a saint that would help her find her keys, and if she wanted to sell something, she would bury a statue of Saint Joseph upside down in the backyard. And
Mm.
so there are all these ornate, basically Staggeria rituals that she taught me, but it was all couched in Catholicism, right? And I wasn't raised Catholic, but I was very passionate about these things that she taught me. It was almost like this innate wisdom that I had. And later started reading about witchcraft and magic and got really interested in it. And what I love about it is it's not an external dogma that you have to go through these specific things in order to do it. It's very personal. And so it's all about personal practice and the way that you want to connect to the divine. And that's what I really love about it. So the way I think of magic is, and how I practice it is the idea that, and this is very Jungian, and that's
Mm.
also my family tradition is Northern Italy, right? So Jung lived right where my ancestors lived. Um, is this idea of the conjunctio, where you send out a magic spell, and that's the masculine energy, the magic wand sending something out, and as a culture, we're really good at that, asking for what we want. I want this and that. I'm wishing and praying for this and that. So that part's easy for people to understand. But the other half of magic is the receptivity. It's magnetizing what we want to bring into our reality and closing that gap. It's the receptivity. It's the feminine aspect. And so the way that I love to play with magic is this homeostasis that you can find in sending energy out and calling energy in. So I do a lot of work around that. I've also found that the more I'm in alignment with service and integrity, the more clear my channel is, the more I'm able to move energy through me. And so I've come to really see it as being a conduit for something that wants to be born through me, that wants to, I'm kind of like a midwife to the energy that wants to move through me. And that's been a big part of my practice too. So I don't know if that exactly answers your
Mm.
question, but that's what I'm passionate about with magic. And it pairs beautifully with psychedelic work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really interested to explore magic and how it relates to the psychedelic experience itself, and kind of realms of consciousness, and also, yes, the spiritual realm that we go through. And maybe just to move into that direction just slightly, combining magic with this sense of what is a human being, what is life,
Mhm.
what realms do we exist on in any one part of momentary existence, and both preceding the birth of our body. I think the psychedelic experience really does bring those questions up, and in a sense, it's not the answers that gives us the transformation. It's the very questions and that kind of shaking of our normal sense of self, or just of normality itself, and nothing really replacing it, and just being replaced by, wow, just being in this moment, having more gratitude, and feeling this connection for other, for all, and for there being, yeah, a creator, and for nature itself. So I feel like that's magic, that's energy. And how do we connect with that? It's not through our brain. We're not thinking that. We can
Yeah.
breathe into it in our body. But I feel it's a soul or a spirit or an energy. And different traditions have different words for that. So I'm interested, how do you explain that to others, or how do you experience that within your own self, this energy of spirit or soul, of magic moving through you?
Wow. I was just soaking in your every word. I love how you
Mm.
articulated that. Um, I was thinking about this journey that I had a long time ago that I came out of, and I was really feeling like an atheist. Like there was, even though I practice magic, I go through these periods of existential angst and feeling like there's nothing, right? And I came out of that journey and I exclaimed, "Oh my, I'm not afraid that there's nothing. I'm afraid that there's everything."
Wow.
And what I meant by that was, if I don't have a human brain to organize experience through my senses and organize experiences through sequential time, right, which our brain does, that paramedial frontal cortex does that beautifully, organizes time. And I'm having this consciousness that is everything everywhere all at once.
I watched that
How
yesterday, actually. Yeah.
it's amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
How what is that? Can that be overwhelming?
Mm.
Would that be, how would I organize experience, right? And psychedelics really do that. I think it was Aldous Huxley who said the brain is a reducing valve. And you get to these spaces where you're really questioning what is reality. I've come to understand that this reality that we're in is just one slice of a potential experience, dream that we're having, and there are all kinds of other dreams we could be having. And this human experience is about contrast. It feels like it's about holding the tension of opposites. And there's something about the duality of this human experience that keeps us here. And so, suffering, feeling happy and at peace, sleepy, awake, hungry, full, male, female. There's all these life, death. There are all these dualities in this way of experiencing. And that's built into the system of being a human. And so I think there's something about that makes it interesting to be here on this planet at this time. And that has informed why I feel like I do what I do here and what I'm really passionate about, which is helping people not suffer so much. Because at this local level, suffering is very real in these bodies in this local moment. If you can pull the lens out far enough, maybe suffering doesn't exist if energy isn't created nor destroyed. But we don't have that experience in human bodies. We have that experience of suffering, right? Sometimes. A lot of our suffering is about ideating about suffering that we've had in the past or suffering that might happen in the future, which causes a lot of distress. But, that I think is really linked to the human experience.
And psychedelics can give a sense of escaping that suffering or that pain. But I think some people can get a bit too tied up in the actual experiencing of the psychedelic, that is the magic in that moment when they're journeying and tripping. But it's actually being alive beyond that in the 99% of our waking life where we're not tripping. Hopefully, it's around that level. And how to find magic in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the project is trying to take, I think of it in the archetypal language and alchemical language. The sublimatio is air element, the spiritual awakening and vastness that we find in psychedelic experiences. But we have to come back down to earth, to coagulatio, earth element. And that's the integration process of translating that to this. And to me, that's the part that is the juiciest, most fruitful part of psychedelic work, is how do you translate that to how I can be better in this moment, how I can have less suffering in this moment, how I can have more compassion in this moment. That's where all of it relates to the human experience, right? If we're going to come back into this body, it's got to make sense in this life.
Yeah. I love that you're bringing in the 5 elements, Sunny, because in our Vital course, I'm not sure if you've seen it, it's a 12-month course. It's got 5 modules, and so each module is loosely somewhat, but really focusing on each of the 5 elements, and it's the ether, the 5th element that kind of coagulates all of these, that is kind of life itself, that is the integration module that we're teaching right now. That's amazing. Where the magic happens in the integration. It's not in the tripping space. That's just opening the door, opening the window. And it's interesting we're talking.
It shows you the vista. Yeah, it shows you the vista. Like Alan Watts said, psychedelics can show you the vista, but you have to walk the path. And sorry to interrupt you. I was just really excited.
I just had just the fact I've changed my mind now. I was going to say something else, but in Kabbalah, I've just been reading. We've got a book called the Tanya that I study with a friend of mine, and it's saying that the highest sephirah is Keter, and kind of beyond that, there's the realm, I think the 4th dimension of Atzilut, and it's the intersection of those. There's like a window, and it's perpetually open, but we never get to kind of see the crack of the opening because there's a curtain in front of it, and that's us. We are that curtain, but it's always there and it's always open, and beyond that is infinite kind of transcendental, divine, rapturous everythingness and nothingness all at the same time. But that window's always open, and I think sometimes that's why all we need to do is sometimes just take a deep breath, or just I tell you, when I'm with my wife and my 2 kids, I'm like when we're like just bedtime, telling a story, and I say to my kids, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, right now, they don't feel as good as we feel right now, you know. And we're very blessed, and we've got good things, but we don't have mansions and cars and all that stuff. We're pretty, middle class. But just in that moment, I feel like that's where that window or doorway is open, and we are there transcending it together. And I think it can really help to be with others to get through that window, because I think we often get stuck on the other side of that window curtain because we're alone and we're disconnected. And I know you've done work as well with groups of women in a coven on each month. And I think doing group work, especially around a fire, doing rituals, calling in the directions, and it helps to us to connect together with that window that we all fly through and feel life beyond our body and our self as David and Sunny. We go beyond that. So I don't know, anything there you want to riff off?
There are so many trailheads I want to take. I don't know where I want to go. People have been gathering and storytelling and doing ritual for a long, long time, right? A long, long time. And it's so innate to our being to tell stories. I think a lot about, before we owned property and we're in one settled place, we were nomadic and we didn't have a lot of belongings. So what we had were our oral traditions and our stories. And so telling stories, creating meaning, sharing that meaning with one another is something that's the most intrinsic aspect of being human, right? It's our ability to make a mythology together. And so when you're talking about integration or having these really incredible psychedelic experiences, I was just listening to the story about a guy who went to a ketamine clinic and his first experience, and he went home and was trying to tell his wife about how he saw his kids in these pods, and it was this amazing experience. And she said, I'm worried about you. I think you're going crazy. I don't understand. And so integration in groups from psychedelic experiences is really, really powerful, because we're sharing meaning, we're sharing stories, and people get it. They have been to the other side of the curtain and been through the open window, and we're helping each other walk each other home, right? We're helping each other make sense of that story and coming down the mountain together, to help one another translate that back into our daily lives. In my favorite thing now is doing group retreats because of that group integration experience. Something I think happens, there's an alchemy that happens where I do a lot of IFS work. So I think about parts. Someone is working with a part of them that came up in the journey. And that is that we each have a part of us that suffers in that same way that we can recognize. And so there's this polyvalent healing that's happening in the group circle as we process all these things together, and we're helping each other make sense of it. And there's incredible potency in that experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunny. So I know you do magic. I know you do ketamine therapy and training and retreats. I know you do VR as well, virtual reality, and art. And there's a great connection. In a sense, it's a little bit of a contradiction, the kind of, VR technology and, nature and traditions and rituals and magic. But maybe there's this piece here around psychedelics and particularly ketamine. I think most of your work is within, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Where do you feel people can go, or where can they feel into in that psychedelic space, when they're using ketamine of whatever, route of administration and dosage? Where do they go, and kind of how does that, and we can talk about VR and tech next, but just from that human level, where do they go in that moment, and how do you help them kind of understand and how to navigate where they are? And we can talk about archetypal meanings as well around that.
Meaning, where do they go when they have a ketamine experience?
Yeah, kind of internally within their experience, and how to help them kind of be there, not so much integrate, but more just to connect with that and feel into it.
Let's talk about ketamine for a minute,
Yeah.
because it's such an amazing molecule. I love all the psychedelics, and when they're all available and legal, I'll be using all of them. But for right now, ketamine is what we have available to us. But I'll still use ketamine because it's very sustainable for practitioners. It's a 2 or 3 hour journey, and it gives people a digestible amount of material for therapy, that the journeyer. Oh, I don't know where people go. It's the signature of ketamine. I call ketamine the open source code of psychedelics because it doesn't have a very strong signature or agenda in and of itself. Like, psychedelics like ayahuasca and psilocybin definitely have a presence. DMT has a presence that of beings that live in that space. And it seems like you go to this place that's informed by the beings that are that run that space. Ketamine is more open-ended. It feels like it takes autobiographical content and feeds it back to you in interesting ways. The signature of ketamine, I think probably because it works on the GABAergic system instead of the 5-HT2A receptor system, it downregulates the right amygdala, which is the smoke detector of the brain, the fear center of the brain. So it has this interesting signature of pulling us out of the experience and into observer mind. And it also has a signature of traveling. So that combination is super interesting for therapy. And I love using internal family systems with ketamine for that reason, for the reason that it takes you out of the story and into observer mode. So, and I'll focus on autobiographical trips, which I think is kind of the first. Let me couch this through a bigger lens. When we start doing psychedelics, the first phase of psychedelic work is autobiographical content. Once you kind of graduate from that level, it seems like we go into other realms of experiences. A book I'll recommend to readers that outlines this really beautifully is Chris Bache's book, LSD and the Mind of the Universe. Fabulous book that kind of this trajectory of where we go. But if we talk about autobiographical content for now, okay, with ketamine, I think where you go in that first phase is you can watch things that are happening in your life, autobiographical content that might be from childhood, or it might be couched in really symbolic archetypal material, but you're able to observe it with some distance. And that signature is really profound for helping people work through trauma, depression, anxiety, because you're able to separate from the story. And so when they come back, I do all this work with helping them integrate through internal family systems and asking those parts what they need, helping those parts unburden. So that whole process is super fruitful with ketamine. So I think that that's kind of where you go. The signature of ketamine helps you work through autobiographical content, or it can. And it all depends. I mean, the amazing thing too about ketamine is it's so different at different dosages. And a practitioner can have a lot of creativity with treatment planning. And you can do a psycholytic dose. I do this all the time where I put them in a trance and we talk through the whole session. And I do IFS or EMDR work in a trance-like state. Or we can do a mid dose where they go in journey and they don't talk for an hour and then they come back and we do integration. So there's a lot of ways to work with it to help people come to peace with events that have happened in their lives, and in their relationships too.
Yeah, I love how you're talking about that it offers like a menu of options, and you can use different tools, however you want to describe them, based on what that person needs that you're working with. And for me, ketamine's always has felt like a rocket ship. Like it really goes high. It's fast, and just kind of strap in and let go. Like so that's why from an autobiographical perspective, it can be difficult to just focus on one place because it moves on quickly. And I know sometimes that's part of the surrendering, and it happens as well with other molecules and compounds as well. But there really seems to be something, about ketamine in particular, that it just moves really fast, and it's moved kind of 360 degrees as well. So it's not a linear, like, okay, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like, woo, kind of really different realms. And it's, I think the transpersonal realm is quite profoundly experienced through using ketamine. Because so I think from a training perspective as well, it's awesome, because it's legal and there's different routes of administration, dosage, amounts. So it really can work very nicely with psychedelic practitioners going through training, and I love that you're doing so much of that with IFS and also with Dick Schwartz himself. So
Yeah.
it must be amazing to be doing that and to kind of developing those protocols and introducing so many folks to that. What are you finding some of the takeaways that people are getting through ketamine and IFS training? And I know a couple of folks that did a training with Dick Schwartz in upstate New York. I'm not sure if you were there as well, Sunny, a couple of months back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I won't mention by name, but yeah, wow, they said it was literally life-changing. Seasoned therapists are like, yes, that's the way I want to go.
Yeah.
And one in particular does somatic experiencing and IFS and
Hmm.
ketamine, and it just sounds
Yep.
phenomenal. So what is it you think about, you've said it already really, the IFS piece, but taking a few days with practitioners to experience it themselves, receiving the medicine and sitting for others receiving the medicine?
Yeah, IFS dovetails beautifully with psychedelics. Annie and Michael Mithofer use IFS, and I was trained with them for MDMA, so it applies to all different psychedelics. But yeah, I was at that training. I organized that training with Dick Schwartz and Phil Wolfson and the group there. It was at Menla,
Yeah.
which was wonderful. Yeah, it was really great. And we did psycholytic dosing with low dose ketamine and processing in groups. Dick and I just finished a retreat where we did that same cyclitic dose with doing IFS work, and then mid dose experiential with IFS integration. And it's really a powerful way to amplify the work that can be done in ketamine and with IFS. I've been doing IFS and EMDR trauma work for years and years, and it felt like now I was thinking, oh, it's kind of like I had this handheld screwdriver all these years that I was trying to get this work done, and then ketamine comes in, and it's like having a power drill suddenly, where you can do so much in so much less time. But also, if you don't know what you're doing and you have a handheld screwdriver, you can only do so much damage. If you have a power drill, you can do a lot of damage. So, that underscores how essential it is for people to be properly trained in psychedelic therapy, but also properly trained in IFS or EMDR or whatever other modalities you're using, somatic processing. I did a training with Leisha Skye, who's Bessel van der Kolk's wife, and she does somatic processing. And we were both part of the leadership team there, and she was working with giving people permission to be able to move their bodies while they were on ketamine. Not get up and dance around, but be able to move. And that was this total game changer for a lot of people. So, knowing what you're doing and bringing these different modalities in to work with psychedelics can be really powerful to use these eclectic approaches. So I'm glad that your colleague got so much out of that training. It was really a beautiful, beautiful week together.
Yeah, I'm very keen to do some IFS training myself, so I'll have to
Hmm.
talk with you about that. So I know it's so in demand. It
Yeah,
really is.
yeah,
Um, it's from what I know, it really feels like it's perfectly suited to psychedelics. I know so many people are
hmm,
wanting to do it, and they're on the wait list, and
yeah,
it really feels like big things are going to happen. And
yeah,
we actually interviewed Dick a year ago on our podcast, and we were talking about different groups of people that IFS helps.
hmm,
We're talking about young people, kids, teenagers in particular,
yeah.
and executive leaders too. So I'm interested. What groups do you feel like IFS and psychedelics could be used for that maybe is slightly out of the box than your typical psychonaut or psychedelic practitioner?
Yeah, well, regarding IFS, it's what I love about it is it's non-pathologizing, right? So you're looking at, for listeners that may not be familiar, you're not diagnosing people as being one thing or another. You're saying you have these parts that are extreme, and we're going to help unburden these extreme parts so that you can become more self-led. So being self-led or doing things like leading with compassion and curiosity and confidence and clarity and connectedness, the 8 C's that Schwartz talks about. So IFS is great for anyone. And psychedelics, I think, I don't personally work with children, so I can't really speak to that. I'm not saying that they're not great for young people. I just don't work with that population. But something I think a lot about with psychedelics, all the research, of course, to be able to be rescheduling, these medicines, we need to do research on people with things like treatment resistant depression or veterans with PTSD, right? We're going for how these can help people that have mental illness. But psychedelics are really amazing for people who are well. So I would love to see more research for working with psychedelics for people that aren't suffering, that want to become more creative or potentiate, the way that they're leading companies or, things like that. It's interesting in our culture in the US, we're so hung up about having fun. Like we have all these hangups about having fun and sex and all these things that we, are super uptight about. But, when you think about the word recreation, the root of the word is to recreate, right? To come back to your creative libido and reinvigorate yourself through recreation. So I don't know why it's so terrible to say it's okay to use psychedelics
Yeah.
recreationally, right? I would love to see that in the future as we get into these, legalization and decriminalizing and rescheduling. I'd love to see that as a potential. So that's kind of an aside from what you asked me. But, when you say thinking outside the box, I think, in the future, I would love to see people that are well being able to use psychedelics to expand their creativity and well-being, and to recreate with them. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Sunny. I'd never thought to break down that word, to recreate. It's
Mhm.
fascinating. I love it. And I also, fundamentally agree with us recreating our relationship with plant medicine, psychedelics, with that kind of realm of consciousness that we're just scared of. Like a lot of people, they just don't want to go there. Like it's like, oh God, what might happen if I have some mushrooms or smoke cannabis? And yeah, it's not for everyone. It needs to be done in the right way, of course. But there's a fear, there's an uncertainty. What will it reveal to me? What will I feel like that maybe I don't want to, I'm not ready for? And I'm really happy that so many states in America and other countries around the world are kind of recreating their laws, putting bills through their kind of state senates to say, hey, this isn't working, this war on drugs isn't working. Let's just change this relationship that we have with the medicine, with the consciousness.
Yeah, definitely. It's important. And I never thought in my lifetime would we be able to be doing this for work. It's so amazing that we're in this time and things are changing so rapidly. All of these bills that are coming up and in states all over the United States to, that move these medicines into more available places for people. It's incredible. It's a really exciting time to be alive. And some of my older friends that were part of the prohibition era, Bill Richards, he's had to, shut down all of that research for decades. It's ridiculous,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think
it's
about
nice.
the
It's nice to see.
hundreds of thousands, millions of people's lives could have been saved, quite possibly, if the initial research from the 60s and 70s continued. You didn't have that, 30, 40-year hiatus.
Yeah.
So we're in amazing times now. Just want to touch briefly on another reality of our times. We're also in quite horrific and very scary times right now. And I understand you're also aware of that and this sense of the damage that humanity are doing to self, others, the world. And how do we come to terms with that? And I was just, teaching a group today that became this term domicide, like the destruction of our home, like domicile, like we're destroying our home, like burning it down, kind of destroying it. And, there's tanks moving into the Ukraine right now. So we're in amazing times with moving out of prohibition, with, more people using psychedelics than ever before, and, really helping with healing and with this recreation and redefining of their self. But we're going through some really scary, traumatic, uncertain times as well. Um, Archetypally, we could look at that. What is it that we're going through? Like, from a transpersonal, Groffian perspective as well. Like, what are we're kind of moving through into this new era, but we're kind of going through some real powerful, painful birth pains right now. So, anything around this part that you're kind of thinking about or feeling into recently, at kind of the times that we're in, kind of being this on the other side of the wonderment, and how we can work to kind of hopefully birth a better future.
Wow. No, beautifully articulated. Thank you for offering that and
Yeah.
bringing that into the conversation.
Mm.
Of course. I mean, I love nature. I'm so connected to nature. Psychedelics early on in my life helped me feel connected to nature. And I see this as a potential to reestablish our connection. Um, we live in a weird time because we're so separate from being connected to the outside world. We live in these boxes that are insulated and heated, and any little tiny bit of discomfort, we can change the thermostat and we can get on computers. And instead of looking at a sunset, we're looking at the sunset that's on our screensaver on our computer. It's crazy. And so I think that disconnect from the natural world makes us lose empathy for her. And psychedelic experiences commonly reconnect people with nature. I'm thinking about a client that I had last year in my office who was having a ketamine experience. And as he was coming out, he was looking at this beautiful plum tree that was outside of my office window. And he had this whole experience with this plum tree. This plum tree was his brother. And and I can understand that plum tree and all the seasons that it's gone through, and this intimate experience with a natural object that wasn't a human was very profound for him. And so then how that instead of nature being this big thing, or this or the climate collapse as being this overwhelming situation that people have no direct connection to or feel overwhelmed to be able to make a change, all of a sudden this guy's invested in how this tree is doing. This tree is my friend, and it can bring you to that level where you have these intimate experiences with sentient beings that are outside of the human race. And there's incredible potential for that. I don't think that I really believe in synchronicity and divine order, and this unfolding that's happening. And I don't think there's any accident whatsoever that psychedelics are becoming mainstream at the same time we're facing the biggest problems that we've ever faced. I don't think that it's like, oh, this is the obvious answer and it's going to, it's a panacea that's going to save us all. But there are always countervalences to what's happening in the world. And I feel like as things become more and more polarized, in our culture, the good and the bad are in direct opposition and contrast to one another. And I think what we need to do is try to find ways to come together and work through these polarizations and find that common goal. And we all need to breathe air, and we all need to drink water, and we all need to live on this planet. We're not moving to Mars yet. We're not as Douglas Rushkoff in the amazing book Survival of the Richest. I don't know if you've read it yet, but
No.
it's phenomenal. He said, the richest are trying to build spaceships that go faster than their own exhaust. What a perfect way to sum it up. We're trying to build a spaceship that goes faster than the
Mm.
destruction that we've created. And, it's time to take accountability, to come home, to really appreciate that there is no other Earth. This is it, baby. We gotta do something about making our world livable, and not just for humans. We're in this post-humanist era. We don't have a mythology yet that's connecting us to what's next. I think that's what's causing us a lot of
Mm.
distress. Yuval Harari talks about it a lot. We don't have a common mythology. Unfortunately, I think what's starting to gel is the AI mythology, that this Harari calls it Homo Deus, that the AI are going to come and save us and be our gods, and the mommy and daddy that come and rescue us from the monsters that we've created that are under our bed. But I think that there's a possibility to have like a Gaianistic mythology where we expand our empathy and compassion beyond the human race into all sentient beings that we share this planet with. And psychedelics are a way to help facilitate that compassion. Yeah. I'm
Mm,
super passionate about this,
mm.
and I'm so glad that you brought it up, because we need to couch what we're doing into a bigger lens of what we're doing, right? Why we're doing this.
Yeah, I love what you just shared. Thank you, Sunny. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating that we're going from the individual and their own experiences, their healing, their consciousness, their sense of self, and recreating that, and then we're zooming out to Earth and humanity, the 8 billion of us, and kind of recreating our mythology. And you're right, we have lost that, a sense of meaning and purpose and something that ties us together. Like we really have lost that, and we're not trying to all be the same. That's not what we're going towards. And I love how important nature is to you, and I feel that too. Nature's always been something that's kind of kept me alive in my darkest moment, to be honest. Just being alone in nature, wherever it would be, in the trees and by the ocean, in the mountains. Nature is healing inherently itself. We feel safe in nature. It hasn't got an ulterior motive. It's not going to try and steal from us or kill us or lie to us. It's just there, and it will live beyond us, and that's reassuring.
Oh,
You
very,
know.
very, yeah. Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know if having these, we were talking about consciousness earlier, and recognizing that the earth is conscious too. In some way, it's a sentient being that has a different timeline and a different way of experiencing itself. But having that belief that the earth itself has some consciousness is really that's been a profound realization for me in my life, is understanding that it's not just all about humans. Right? It's
Yeah.
about animals and plants and fungi and the earth herself. Wow.
Mm. And it's lovely to think that she's communicating with us, but are we hearing? And if we're not hearing, she's going to keep communicating, but just louder and louder and more obviously and blatantly
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not well, and hey, that's not
Mm-hmm.
what your role is here to, to be killing
Yeah.
me. So I feel like now's an interesting time. We're going from kind of speaking of like the universe and Earth and consciousness to VR. And how does technology come into this? It scares the hell out of me, technology. I'm learning to use a lot of these new software programs, and I'm on the fence about AI.
Yeah.
Chat GPT. A lot of people. I'm seeing people losing their jobs. I was just at Heathrow
Yeah.
Airport, and there are robots cleaning Heathrow Airport now.
Wow.
And there's shops with no people behind the counter. They've got literally 100 cameras in the shop, and you just scan your phone when you go in, and then it just watches what you pick up and bills you when you walk out. So I'm worried. I do worry about technology. I do want to just
Yeah.
flee to the hills to escape all of it and not get a microchip put somewhere in my body. I don't know where. But what's your take on tech, generally speaking? How to utilize it? Where's the secret source of how you want to use tech to help people and to be part of this global healing potentially?
Mm-hmm. I'm with you in worrying about AI.
Mm,
I see it's just like the conversation earlier with about psychedelics and the screwdriver, right? Like, these are powerful tools. Psychedelics are powerful tools. AI technology, powerful tools. And a saying that I love, that I say all the time, is intention is everything. What's your intention in using these things, right? So, you know, again, I want to reference Douglas Rushkoff's books. Survival of the Richest talks a lot about technology, and I really appreciate his take on it. Um, we're going to have what Harari calls the useless class, that a lot of jobs are going to be gone and AI will replace those jobs. So what do all these people do? Are we looking at Ready Player One world, where everyone just pops on a VR and doesn't leave their house, and AI does, and we have a UBI, a universal basic income that, keeps everyone alive. I don't know. I think we're entering this phase where we're going to have huge shifts. But, I was thinking about, people, there was all this controversy online about Lensa and the avatars, people were, artists were getting angry about that. And I'm an artist.
Mm.
I don't want to be replaced by a robot. But I was thinking, oh, I wonder if, back when cameras were invented, if the portrait painters were, shaming everyone from using cameras and shaming the
Yeah.
photographers, like technology comes and I haven't really seen humanity be able to say no to things that make life more convenient. I haven't really seen that. So, I don't know if we can stop it at this point. Um, so then I've talked to a lot of people that are involved in the AI, like really intimately involved in AI, and ethics, teaching AI ethics is a huge area of interest. That's a big concern when these entities become self-aware. Will they have the same moral compass to care about the earth and its beings? I don't know. It's a quandary. But I do see technology being a powerful tool. A lot of people can't afford therapy. So I'll give you an example. A
Yeah.
lot of people can't afford therapy. And trauma and depression and anxiety are everywhere. People are suffering. Billions of people are suffering from these diseases. And so I'm finding, 3 years ago in my clinical practice, I'm having all of these people that have gone to a ketamine clinic, have been hooked up to ketamine, have no experience with ketamine. The clinic has HGTV blaring behind them. They're not given any music. No one speaks to them. And at the end of it, they're wheeled out to their Uber, to get a ride home. And they come to me saying, I feel traumatized. This trauma came up and I have no way of understanding what happened to me. So that was the impetus to create a company with David Starfire, the music producer, called PsyAssist. And the idea was to create musical playlists that people could listen to, could bring on their own mobile app, could listen to while they're getting a ketamine infusion. And there's a voice guidance meditation by me that I've written to help them orient to the ketamine space. And there's an integration at the end of that to help them make sense of what happened to them. And of course, it's open-ended because it's a pre-recorded offering. So David and I developed this, and then we were acquired by TRIPP, which is a VR company that does VR meditations. And I came on as the clinical director of TRIPP. And I feel like, and I've been adamant about best practice and being really conscientious about how these tools are offered to people in a way that is working with clinicians, with oversight from clinicians. But I sense that these tools can really help people feel more calm and taken care of in the psychedelic space if there isn't a therapist that's sitting with them for the 2 or 3 hours. So that's a way to leverage technology to help people and provide people support that can't afford to pay for a therapist. MAPS is looking, I think I've heard that MAPS to put someone through the entire sequence of MDMA therapy is something like $25,000 per person, I think is what I've heard. And so, I'm curious about how these things are going to be scalable and feasible for people, right? So I think that we can use these tools to help support people. And we have a mobile app that gives support in between your ketamine sessions so that people can engage with this app at home to help make sense, do that coagulatio, that integration that we talked about, and make sense of what happened to them in between therapy sessions, right? So that's an example of how I see AI or technology being helpful, but I think the intention has to be for the right reasons. And I don't know if maximizing capital is the right reason every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you recognizing that there are a lot of folks out there that have the maximization of capital as the primary or sole kind of indicator or goal here. Yeah, and there's a debate, and they're not going to go away. Technology is not going to go away. Capital and capitalism isn't going to go away. It's how to make it work, hopefully in a more kind an ethical
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
I'd like to stick on this subject a wee bit and just get a sense more specifically on a granular level. Sunny, how does VR work with a person who's, say, going for ketamine therapy? So say they're having it in a prep session, would they start to use VR just to familiarize themselves with, non-ordinary states and kind of exploring other dimensions and letting go into that and kind of breathing into that and having the music and the kind of your recording to kind of guide them into just, say letting go of tensions, for example. How does it, if you could just talk through, how does it work?
Yeah. Um, so right now we're doing a study on reducing anxiety using VR prior to a ketamine session, and I'm excited to see what the results we'll find. But what I think the value of using VR with ketamine or other psychedelic therapy, one of the applications can be. Have you used VR, David?
I did it once and it blew me away. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah, you're wearing the device and it's very immersive. You're in this 3D world and you completely forget about the place that you're in if you take off the device. And there's voice guidance and this amazing music by David. So you can imagine that it kind of simulates psychedelics. And there was a study about how it's comparable, like the immersiveness of it is comparable to a psychedelic experience. You don't, of course, have the same, neurophysiological effects that you get from things like ketamine that, leave those, create all this BDNF and mTOR, and you have all this like neuronal growth after. You don't have those benefits. But what I like about thinking about VR is someone can go into this immersive experience. Someone who's really nervous about going into a psychedelic experience, like you talked about earlier, that don't know what to expect. And you're in this immersive environment. And you and I know once you take ketamine, you can't untake ketamine. You're there for 2 or 3 hours and you're going on the journey, right? Once you take the medicine, you can't untake the medicine. But with VR, you can take off this headset if you don't like it. And I think that sense of control can help people titrate into the surrendering experience that comes with psychedelic therapy. And I imagine that would help reduce anxiety because they have some semblance of control and can kind of feel into it. And then as they get more comfortable, can go on the experience. And then in the journey, feel more like they can surrender to an immersive experience. And I'm really curious about that, if that is the case. Um, but I really, they've done some studies with TRIPP, and it does help reduce anxiety in general. Doing a practice like that and doing these breathing exercises is really powerful. And in that immersive environment where you're not being distracted by your cat meowing or your kids coming into the room or whatever, you're in the VR experience,
Hmm.
um, does help reduce anxiety. So I can see it partnering with psychedelic therapy.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that from the cost perspective and resources. Like, there's not enough trained psychedelic therapists right now, and it's probably going to take at least a decade to get there. So, with the level of trauma and need that we have, so perhaps VR can play a piece in that, just to make it more accessible.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate, I do not see VR as a replacement for
Yeah.
therapists at all. In fact, I think the more we get into technology and AI, the more in-person experiences with another human being are going to become increasingly valuable to us. We have evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to be pro-social animals that connect with other beings like us. And that's not going away anytime soon. I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to have Ready Player One and have good mental health. You need to, during the pandemic, I had this really interesting experience where I was doing all of my sessions on Zoom, which is beautiful and convenient. And I still use that, especially for clients that have a hard time coming to the office, if they have a disability or if they have kids or whatever. But I was so aware of what I was missing when I'm there in the presence of someone in their energy field and we're breathing together when they're in the ketamine experience, and I'm co-regulating and entrained with them and helping them to breathe and calm their bodies down. Just stuff like that you don't realize how important that is until it's gone.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that as AI and technology takes a lot of jobs, I think there are certain sectors of human connection that are going to become more important than ever, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. You made me remember a client I had a few years ago, a Vietnam vet that had PTSD, and he just couldn't get through it, and we couldn't do ketamine because it wasn't available where I was. But he had this app. I think it might have been Calm, where it gave you it somehow tuned into his breathing, or he would tune his breathing into this image of a circle expanding and shrinking to a point in the center and then expanding, and it would get slower and slower. And that visualization of this circle on just looking at his smartphone enabled him to do guided breath work that he'd never done before. It was just physically seeing that. And I know other people, just with VR, being able to see how our vision changes, and we kind of have to go with it because it's there, and letting go, it does help us just to almost just be led into that realm a
Yeah.
bit more willingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Tripp has this beautiful breathing. It's in the voice guided meditation I did for ketamine too, where it's a box breathing animation, and it's 4 by 4 by 4, and there are these particles that come out from outer space and go into your nose and flow in as you're breathing in, and then come out and go out, the particles go out of your nose and out into the environment. And you can't resist doing it because it's so fun. It feels like you're causing this particle reaction to happen, and it's completely wonderful. So and then that creates that vagus nerve stimulation and
Mm.
all of these things that are happening physiologically that are getting you to participate in this interactive gamification of breathing, right? So it's very valuable.
Yeah, and you mentioned an anxiety study that you're doing, Sunny. When is that coming out, and where is that being located? If you can share as much as you can, please.
Yeah, I can't share too much right now, but it's in California. Our study site is in California, and we're thinking March. We're going to have our results in March or April, and that's going to coincide with the release of our beta for our PsyAssist app, which will be on VR and mobile. And we'll be testing that at a few test sites and then releasing that. So we're really
Awesome.
excited about it. I'm very, very proud of it, and it's been such a passion project for David Starfire and me to create, and my wonderful team at Trip. They've just been
Mm.
incredible with all of the resources and attention and talent that has gone into it. It's super exciting.
And just to plug David Starfire, so I haven't heard his music, I have to be honest, but I definitely am going to listen now because it's silly that I haven't. He sounds like a lovely, lovely chap. And what's
Yeah.
it been like to work with him? What kind of music, if you could just describe it to me, does he kind of
Yeah.
create?
He is a lovely chap. I like that. So David's been in the psychedelic music scene for a long time. David and I actually met in 2006. I co-produced an event for Sundance Film Festival in Utah called Mindbender. And this was back before people were really talking openly about psychedelics. And we premiered this movie called Entheogen there, which is all about psychedelics. And David came and played. It was before any of these guys had gotten big. So we had Bass Nectar play, and it was in this tiny venue. We had Bass Nectar there and David Starfire, and Android Jones was there doing live painting for the event. We had a video screen that was doing these live video DJing, and then we brought out Ralph Metzner, who started CIS. And just to tell you a little bit about Ralph, he came out and we thought he was going to give a lecture, but he did a rap performance about nature and loving nature. So here's this cute little old guy that was like 80 years old that was rapping to this to this audience about
Far
nature.
out.
It was far out. Anyway, so David played, and we became friends then, and stayed in contact, and have been friends for a long time, and then started working together on this project. And subsequently, he's been coming to retreats that I'm producing and hosting, and playing live music. So we'll play his produced, music track digitally in the room, and then he does live music layering on it, and he does live DJing. And at this recent retreat I did with Dick Schwartz, that David was there doing the live music. It was so fun because if someone was starting to get agitated in the journey, I could cue David, and he and I are so attuned, and he's attuned to the group and incredibly aware. He would be able to change the music live and DJ it to curate the experience. And I've been very struck in these experiences with him at how much music is one of the healing components of psychedelic therapy. It is like having a co-therapist in the room, the co-therapist of the medicine and the therapist who's in the space. And then the music is another factor that has a huge influence on how the journey goes. So yeah, we've had a wonderful collaboration, series of collaborations that we've done together. And I'm really looking forward to a few really fun projects that we have coming up too.
Sounds great. And yeah, music really is a huge part of the psychedelic
Mhm.
experience. I've definitely come to realize that it where the music goes doesn't control completely, but it kind of sets the tone and really does influence it a heck of a
Mhm.
lot. And just talking about music and parties, there's a couple of parties in town that a lot of psychedelic folks get invited to. I haven't been invited to any of them yet. I'm not quite cool enough, but there's like Burning Man and Davos and Southeast by Southwest. Yeah. So I know you're
Mhm.
going to be talking at Southeast by. Is it called South by Southwest or Southeast by Southwest?
I think it's South by Southwest.
There we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, I'm not in the cool club, but you're going to go there and talk about VR tech stuff. What is it you're thinking of talking about there when you go in a couple months' time?
I mean, I think we're talking a lot about what you
Yeah.
and I talked about today. How do we bring in VR and technology into the psychedelic experience, and in ways that are aligned with best practice and ethics, and helping therapists feel like these are tools that they can use, where they don't feel like they're being pushed out, but these tools can actually help them give better service and support to their patients.
Mm, awesome. Have you spoken there
Yeah.
before?
No, I haven't. This is my first
Ah,
year.
great.
I'm
Awesome.
excited. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Hope it goes really well. That sounds great.
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You've mentioned art a few times, Sunny. So just
Mhm.
before we start to bring it to a close, I wanted to touch on like what's it like being an artist, and I know your husband as well as an artist, and
Mhm.
how are you, yeah, kind of integrating art within your life, doing so many other things. Like, what role does it play, and how do you kind of tap into it? How's it evolved as well over the years?
Thank you. Well, I started my career as an artist. My undergraduate degree is in graphic design. I actually worked as an animator and out of several video game companies before I became a therapist. So it's kind of funny, how life brings you along this path and things start to make sense, So here I am at Trip and merging all of these things together in this interesting way that, life has pulled me to. Um, but yeah, I've always been a painter. I wanted to be an artist since I was a really little kid, and unfortunately, I think in our culture, artists are kind of in a sidelined community. We don't appreciate artists as much as we should,
Mm,
and it was really hard hustling to be an artist, and I felt like it was such a solitary experience that was initially why I got into becoming a therapist. And I didn't think I was going to love being a therapist, and then I started doing my internships and completely loved it and was so into it that it took up all of my passion. But yeah, Martin, my husband, and I have been painting together, collaboratively painting together for many years, and it's really a passion of mine. And we do really psychedelic paintings, that are pretty out there and pretty archetypal, and it's 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 always been something that has helped me feel alive and connected to nature and to my dreams, and so it's always been kind of therapeutic for me. And the way that we paint together is really an interesting, um, it's almost like marital therapy, I think, when
yeah.
we paint together. Like, how much space do I want to take up? Can I paint over this other person's thing? How these collaborations become these ways of connecting with one another that has been super beautiful in our relationship, in our marriage of 26 years, actually. So
Wow,
I think it's helped
congratulations.
us. Yeah,
That's
thanks.
awesome. And do you paint just with paints, or do you also do electronic kind of computer painting?
Yep, all kinds of stuff. I do live. We've done live painting, on stage at Burning Man. We use acrylics in the studio. I do digital art. I have a lot of paintings that I've done digitally. When I went to Pacifica Graduate Institute for my uh, counseling degree, my thesis was on a dream journal because it was so interesting. I was in the commercial art world, and it felt like all of my creative libido was harnessed toward other people's desires. And when I left that, I thought, oh, I'm going to give up art. I don't want to do art anymore. I'm burnt out. But what happened was that creative libido that I had inside now wasn't being harnessed for anyone else's design. So suddenly I was prolifically painting again, and I was having these amazing dreams because I was going to this Jungian school that houses Joseph Campbell's library, right? So it was stimulating all of this archetypal content in my dreams, and then I would wake up and be totally inspired to make a painting about my dreams.
Mm,
And so my thesis was actually on the hero and heroine's journey, Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero heroine's journey, and how our dreams might be informed by the journey that we're on, and a series of paintings that reflected that journey that I was experiencing.
mm.
So art has always been kind of merged in my mind with psychology. At my retreats, I actually bring a large canvas, and I encourage all of the attendees to work on this collaborative painting together. And then by the end of the week, we have this gorgeous painting that's been, everybody has added onto the painting. We have 20 artists that are part of this creation. So I think art is really beautiful to have as part of the psychedelic experience, incorporated into it.
Beautiful. Yeah, art's incredibly therapeutic, and it's interesting how it can be both your own process of expressing and therapizing, but also the product of that you can use with others as a
Mhm.
tool. So right now I'm looking at this picture that you did, the heroine's hero's journey that you were just talking about, and it's awesome. It kind of looks kind of mystical and mythological the way that you did it, kind of almost like a kind of Lord of the Rings style. But yeah, it's got Joseph Campbell's theories and kind of thesis there,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it makes it just a little bit more relatable. And
Mhm.
like, oh, I get that. Like, it is a journey, and it is this kind of quest, rather
Yep.
than having, say, in bullet points. Like I've seen the same thing in bullet points, and it's okay. Yeah, that's just a slide in a deck with bullet points. But putting it with pictures and colors and images, it's so different.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love in holotropic breathwork, they have the mandalas with art materials, and they encourage you to create a drawing or painting of what you experienced before you speak to anyone as part of that experience. And I really like that because that, as soon as you start giving words to ineffable experience, it collapses it down to something that's simplified beyond what it was. But you can keep it in that open-ended space when you make art around what you experienced, or you make music or dance around what you experience. It
Mm.
holds that openness and that sublime energy of the ineffable. I feel like that's something that's really important as part of that understanding. I love doing that with dreams as well, you know.
Thank you. That was really well expressed. I love it. All right, Sunny, I have adored this conversation. Really awesome how we flowed. I want to ask you to just let folks know if they want to find out some more about you, how can they find you and your work? Where should they go?
Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was super fun. They can find me on the website sunnystrasburgtherapy.com. And I assume you'll have it in the show
Yeah.
notes so they can find the spelling. And sunnystrasburgretreats.com. And then I post things on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I send out quarterly that lets people know everything I'm up to. So there's always something coming down pike in terms of opportunities to come to a retreat or a training. So watch for those.
Thanks, Sonny. And I wanted to talk about Costa Rica because I went there for my 10-year wedding anniversary with my wife in October for the first time. Amazing place. Wow. And you've lived there and do retreats there still. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just briefly before we check out, could you describe the energy of Costa Rica? Because it just blew me away when I was there. It's such a
Oh yeah.
large
So amazing.
place for such a small place, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. People call it the Switzerland of Latin America. It does have that energy of just like a
Mm,
small place that has so many different microclimates, and the Ticos are an amazing people too. It's just really laid back and chill, and let people do what they want to do, and then they have this huge focus on the environment and green tourism, and it's really a beautiful place. We uh we live we When we lived in Costa Rica, we were inland on the foothills of the Chiripo up in the mountains. And that area is so different than the beach, or down in the Osa where it's super green and dense jungle. So I I don't know. Costa Rica has an amazing magical energy to it. I don't quite know how to capture it. It's many things,
yeah.
many magical things.
Yeah, I've been trying to explain how it felt to be there, and I just can't.
Mhm.
And I think the fact that it doesn't have an armed forces as well, it kind of
Mhm.
sums it up to some extent.
Yeah.
Um, well, I really have enjoyed the chat. And I wanted to just say a thank you to Melissa Whippo for introducing us together. She's always been an amazing, helpful person. So thanks, Melissa. And yeah, you're doing amazing work, Sunny. And I really
Thank you.
just wish you nothing but success and happiness and continuing to do all the wonderful things you're doing. And thanks a lot for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you. I appreciate you, and same to you. Thank you for everything that you're doing. This is, a brother in this field, and we're all in here doing the best we can and raising awareness and best practice. And I really appreciate what you do and what you offer to your listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. You got it. All right. Take care, Sunny. Thanks for listening, everyone. God
Thanks.
bless.